beginning. So basically my PhD research is focusing on strengthening legal accountability in global supply chains for abuses of core labor standards in garment industry. And further, I'm focusing on two countries, that is India and Bangladesh. So today I'm here to discuss my literature review and what all have I done and why did I choose this topic and what are the research gaps. Now, since I think most of you are from a non-legal background, so to make it a bit interesting, I'll cut the legal jargon and focus on the problem of the workers and why I chose this topic. Now, if if I may say so, like one of the most common incident which is remembered by the public as far as garment industry is concerned is the Rana Plaza tragedy which took place in 2013. It was not the first tragedy and definitely not the last one. However, that was the tragedy which actually just brought on surface the problems which were being faced by the workers in the garment industry. Now, nearly 1,100 workers were killed in that incident, and thousands were left handicapped for the rest of their lives because they were forced by their bosses, and of course, in turn, by the factory owners, by the brands, to work in very inhabitable and dangerous conditions. Now, as I said, like my topic talks on the global supply chains. Now, see, the thing is that it's, I think all of us know that international outsourcing has become a pillar of the modern economy, and supply chains have actually become order of the day. And if I have to talk in very simple words, by supply chains I mean that where large corporations, they outsource manufacturing of their goods to contractors or middlemen, or to even factory owners, and those middlemen or factory owners, they either manufacture the goods themselves or they further outsource it to the smaller owners or the smaller factory owners or even the informal workers. This informal workers is something which is very specific to garment industry or let's say leather industry. So now when there is so much of subletting, like the owner is giving on to the factory owner, the factory owner is giving on to small contractors, the small contractor is further giving it out to other smaller people or the households, fixing legal liability, ensuring that everything goes according to the regulations, according to the rules, it becomes almost impossible. And this is one of the basic problem which uh, the modern world is facing. Now, if you look at the statistics, that 2019 World Bank reports says that around three-fourths of the world trade is being carried on by the supply chains, and almost I think 94 or yes 94% of the global workforce in the working in the top 50 corporations in the world is hidden in supply chains. Now these supply chains, the very nature in which they are made, the very nature in which they function, it makes it a ripe ground for exploitation of environment, for exploitation of workers. Now, what makes them very dangerous and difficult for workers and for the lawmakers to regulate is the very nature in which it is designed. Now, when a factory is or a corporation is headquartered in one part of the world, and the goods for that corporation are being manufactured in the other part of the world, imagine how difficult it becomes to fix legal accountability or legal liability. This makes them very powerful and also very difficult to be brought to the book. So basically, if we come back to garment industry, that like why garment industry and why it is so important to focus on garment industry. Now the garment industry is a very labor intensive industry, and the way it functions. See, so basically in garment industry, it is driven by intense competition, whether it is the brands or the factories which have got contracts from those brands. Everyone have their own reasons to be very competitive. So basically what the government corporations or the government brand owners, Zara and H&M, Nike, what they are basically looking for is cheap goods at at as quickly as possible, because from almost past 1 decade we have entered into this business of fast fashion, where the fashion, like where the current, like the clothes, they need to change every 6 weeks. So the clothes are made on very short notice, on very short time, and on very cheap prices. So basically every party has their own margin to suppress. Now if if a factory owner increases the price at which he's giving it to the brand, even by a few dollars, the brand owner has some other factory to go to. Or for example, in case of India and Bangladesh, or let's say like Vietnam, if India and Bangladesh, they decide to strictly regulate their labor laws, they decide to strictly regulate the safety and health of the workers. For that, the factory owners would have to make some improvisation in the factories. Now, once they do that, obviously the cost of production is going to rise. So the first instinct which comes to these brand owners is, I mean, of course, I'm giving it just an example. So the brand owners, once Indian and Bangladesh authorities raise the standard of safety or standard of health, and the cost of production goes up, the brand owners will leave these two countries and quickly go to Vietnam. If the Vietnam authorities are ready to look the other way, as long as the brand owners, they keep on giving the orders to the factory owners based in Bangladesh. So this is what we, in trade terms, what we call as race to the bottom. So it's a continuous process. Everyone is trying to offer it as cheaply as possible so that they get the maximum orders. And in cutting the cost, the maximum brunt is borne by the workers. Now, as I said, the Rana Plaza tragedy is definitely not the first or the last. However, it was the one which was the most highlighted. Now, what I've done for the purposes of my research, I've divided it into different heads, and yeah. So these are my broad areas which I'm looking into. I'll talk about. So now coming to first global supply chains and their governance. I've just talked about global supply chains, like what it means in simple terms, and also the fact that around two-thirds of the world trade is being currently carried on by the supply chains. Now, if you look at the positive side of it, then in the supply chains, these supply chains have given work to the most poor and impoverished countries. The workers in Bangladesh, the workers in Vietnam, workers in Cambodia, workers in India have got a lot of work because these supply chains have set up their work here. However, the problems have also increased. Now, if I talk about the supply chains, now see, there's a book, Sweatshop Regime. That book is not from a legal perspective, but that book is focusing on the garment industry in India. Now that book, it gives a very comprehensive view on what exactly are the problems in garment industry in India. One of the biggest problem India is facing, that almost 93% of our workforce is informal. So informal, it becomes all the more difficult to regulate or to protect the informal workers. Another problem which global supply chains are facing, like from a legal perspective, there has been a lot of research in supply chains from a political science perspective, from a CSR perspective. However, as far as legal scholarship is concerned, we don't yet have comprehensive researches, comprehensive look on supply chains from a legal perspective, and that is why we have a lot of regulatory gaps, which I intend to fill through my thesis. Now, another thing in for talking in terms of regulatory and legal gaps, definitely, like for example, the supply chains located in India, of course, are governed by the domestic laws of India. They are governed by the voluntary code of conducts the brand factory has volunteered up to. However, the problem lies in the enforcement. Whether we talk about India or Bangladesh or any other developing country, The problem lies in the enforcement. Either, as I said earlier, the countries, in order to attract more and more business, either they are willing to look the other way just to keep the business going, or they lack the infrastructure to monitor so many factories spread across the country, or their labor department is understaffed, or it is corrupt. Like it's basically a very complex problem, and if we can just if we can just summarize problem of supply chains in one or two paragraphs, I think it would be an oversimplification of one of the most complex problem of 21st century we are facing. Then coming to my area, core labor standards. Now see, labor standards, if I talk about in very basic terms, it governs relationship between employers and employees. Now this term core labor standard, it was basically in June 1998 that ILO, that is International Labour Organization, they adopted ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. It basically reasserted the commitment of ILO member states to respect, promote, and universally fulfill the principles relating to four fundamental rights at work. And those four fundamental principles are freedom of association and effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. Second, elimination of all forms of forced or obligatory labor. Third, effective abolition of child labor. And fourth, elimination of discrimination in employment and occupation. Now, these four fundamental rights at work are commonly referred to as core labor standards, and they form the focus point for analysis of abuses in my research. Now, why they are referred to as core or even fundamental labor standards is because they are to be available to all workers, irrespective of their industry, sex, level of development of the concerned country. And in fact, ILO has laid it down that uh, CLS is mandatory, like core labor standards. All the countries are obliged to comply with it just by virtue of they being member of ILO. I mean, they are not. It is not obligatory that they are the core labor standards are only to be followed by the countries who have ratified the related conventions. No, all the countries are obligated to follow them just by virtue of their membership of ILO. Now, if I talk about international legal and institutional frameworks which are there to protect labor standards, like if you are interested in this area, then you would know that since 2014 there are discussions going on for having a binding treaty on business and human rights. And in fact, when I was giving my candidacy, I was referring to the 2019 draft. And recently, I came across that in August 2020, they have come up with a revised draft. Now, this binding treaty on business and human rights, as the name suggests, they basically want to have a treaty which is binding on the transnational corporations and which makes them accountable for the human rights violation or labor violation and environment violations which they do. And irrespective of the country they are based in and the country in which they are like their chains or whatever their contractors or middlemen they are working. Now this of course the draft has gone through a number of changes, and even this draft which has come up in August 2020, it is to be discussed now at the end of October. I think from 23rd to 28th October there's going to be a virtual session on negotiating this. And of course, the corporations they are doing everything possible to have it as as diluted as possible. Now, one very interesting thing about this recent draft is that though it talks about workers irrespective of whether they are working in a factory, like they don't need to be direct employees of the original factory owner. In fact, this draft has also removed the word contractual, because this contractual word creates a lot of legal complications. There might be some people who are employed and who are doing work for the main corporation, but they might not be in a contract, so they have removed that also. However, very interesting thing is that the draft nowhere uses the word supply chains. the entire draft does not mention the word supply chains. It is a good step, it is a progressive step, but how much it is actually, we are actually, they are actually able to deliver on ground, it remains to be seen. Now, WTO, if I'm sure all of us know a very basic thing, like we have a general idea on what WTO is, World Trade Organization. Now, see, there has been a lot of hue and cry on having labor standards enforced through WTO, and it started when it started, like it was very aggressively pushed. It was very aggressively pushed when Bill Clinton was president, and right since then till this date, the developed countries are in favor of having labor standards enforced through WTO, and the developing countries, including India, Brazil, Bangladesh, they are against this idea. The developed countries, their argument for having it pushed through WTO is that these basic labor rights are actually human rights, and they must be available to all, irrespective of the country in which the workers are situated. Now, the developing countries, on their part, the reason they are so aggressively pushing against it is because they believe it is not the developed countries' concern towards the workers, but it is actually a protectionist agenda. And the developing countries only have a competitive advantage in their favor. And if they are to accept the labor standards being imposed on them by the West, their competitive advantage would go for a toss, and also the sovereignty of the country would also go for a toss. Now, the one of the main reasons because of which I'm tilted towards what the developing countries feel is because I'll share something interesting here. As I said, during the Bill Clinton regime, it was very aggressively pushed. Now, I'm forgetting the year, but there was a WTO meeting where a lot of hue and cry was made to incorporate labor compliance to WTO. And the NGOs and trade unions of the West, which were aggressively pushing for it, and they had an entire charter printed on what all they wanted for the workers. The ironical part is that they were fighting for the rights of the workers of the global South. And while preparing that charter or that demand of rights, not even one trade union or not even one NGO from the global South was consulted. I mean, imagine you are talking about protecting my rights, and you don't even come and ask at what I want. So if the developing countries are cynical about their agenda, they have their own reasons. However, uh, now, like from the past few years, it was being treated as a dead end. Like WTO and labor was like a gone story. But if Donald Trump is to get a second term as his presidency, WTO is slated to go under a lot of changes, and there is a possibility that US might push, at least if not completed, they might push a restart on the talks for including like pushing labor standards through WTO. There is a possibility. Like if Donald Trump is to repeat his term, then we are headed for very interesting times as far as WTO is concerned. Now, coming to free trade agreements, again, a lot of free trade agreements now are including labor standards, and for them, the discussion point, the reference point remains the core labor standards which I have referred to. But again, the same principles on which countries are fighting for or against labor standards in WTO remains the same in free trade agreements. Now, if I talk about the international soft law instruments, I'll quickly summarize. Now, even if whether it is OECD guidelines or it is World Bank, they have guidelines in place. They are talking about labor standards. They are referring at some places to abolition of child labor, abolition of forced slavery, or even a direct reference to 1998 core labor standards. But it is a half-baked attempt. Like for example, World Bank, it doesn't ask the countries, to, let's say, to ensure that the workers have a right to strike or workers have a right to form trade unions. No, It merely asks the borrowers that you should try, or you should just suggest, and if the domestic law of the country doesn't allow, then okay, you are fine with that. Then even uh, for the remaining rights of the workers, it is only for a very defined category of workers for which the borrowers need to be accountable or need to be concerned. For rest of the workers, the borrowers need not be concerned. Then again, for OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, they they are good if you look at it, if you read them. However, they are not binding. They are voluntary. So if you look on the ground, it ends up more as a lip service than actually helping the workers in gaining something. Again, for UN guiding principles on business and human rights, it was a very good initiative. It could have done wonders. However, again, it remains non-binding. Now, if I talk about domestic legal frameworks in India and Bangladesh, now see, domestic legal frameworks, both the countries, India and Bangladesh, they have very well defined codified labor laws. In fact, India recently, I'm so sorry, I'll quickly plug in. Some problem with my battery. Yeah, sorry. So India has recently, basically, we had 44 different labor laws, and in 2020 we have codified them into four laws. Now that has been done to promote the current government's Make in India program, to make it a more attractive investment friendly country. So for that, a lot of worker rights have been thrown out of the window. However, all said and done, both India and Bangladesh have very well defined codified laws. You have rights, you have laws for everything. How to go on a strike, how to form a trade union, maternity rights for women, child care leave, everything. The problem remains in implementation. The problem remains in compliance. Then again, for private regulations, if I have to say, like, if I have to quickly name a few: Fair Labor Association, RAP, Social Accountability 8000, all of these are private regulations which are working. So basic by private regulations, I mean that companies voluntarily sign up, and these private regulators, they have a team of auditors, and they go in the factories and they visit them and they prepare a report, and on the basis of those reports, the different companies are given points or stars, or like, and then they're given suggestions on how they can improve. Again, it's the problem with private regulations are like a lot. Firstly, they are voluntary. Second, there is a inherent bias involved. The owners of, let's say, a factory, for example, a factory is being audited. The owner of that factory is paying the auditors. So if the auditors are very harsh, or they are not ready to look the other way for one or the other thing, so probably the next year the company would call some other auditors. I have a report. If any of you are interested, after this session, I can share those reports with you, where they have done extensive research, and they have come up with their findings, and like it shows some very interesting facts. I mean, they are tragic in the sense that I was talking to this professor who was a part of that team which did the research, which actually did the interviews in some of the factories, and they tell me that even for the genuine auditors, like the auditors who actually want to report what is actually happening in the factories, it's very difficult because, for example, they have some particular songs which if plays, and like there are loudspeakers placed in all different parts of the factory, and the moment that song is played, it is a signal for all the children who are working in the factories to get out immediately from the back doors. So there is no way that auditors can find children working in the factories. Then the workers, they are tutored so well that there have been instances when the auditor has asked, a worker, then like, when is your birthday? And the worker in turn replies, I leave the factory at 5 p.m. It's it's that crazy. And then in some of the cases, the auditors, they actually interview the workers in a AC chamber, and the workers who are interviewed are decided by the owners, are picked by the owners. So how do you rate the genuinity of those interviews? Another problem which is being faced, like after this Rana Plaza tragedy, the companies have taken, especially the brands which are headquartered in EU, they have taken a very strict view of ensuring safety of the workers. So by safety of the workers, they mean that the walls don't just fall on their heads. The electrical wiring of the factory is fine. So what they have done is they have done they are focusing on ensuring that the workplaces are safe, the factory walls, the premises, that no technical accident takes place. However, rights as far as collective bargaining is concerned, as far as right to go on a strike is concerned, the companies, or for example, maternity rights, for that, the companies haven't taken that much of initiative. So coming back to the auditors, there have been instances where people who are doing undercover operations, they have sat outside the factories. Like while interviewing the workers told them that we leave at 5 p.m. and some of them, they sat outside the factories in disguise to see, and the workers actually left at 12 at the night, because it's very common in garment industry that for a shift of 8 hours you are paid for 8 hours, but you work for 12 hours. Again, I read in the same report a couple of years back, a group of researchers had gone to Cambodia, and there they found that child labor was there in every factory of shoes and garments. And some very big brands, they were the factories which were making for those brands, they were paying, it's from 2014, I think. So in 2014, they were paying 40 to 60 cents per day to one child. 40 to 60 cents for an entire day of work for amazingly expensive clothing and shoes brands. So that is a problem. So for private regulations. So what I then again for trade unions, my last topic. Now see, trade unions is a very tricky area. Firstly, both the countries on paper, India as well as Bangladesh, they give the workers right to form trade unions. However, in reality, it's very difficult to register. There have been newspaper reports where as soon as a trade union was formed, and let's say in a factory of 700 workers, uh, 200 workers became a part of that trade union. In the next 2 months, there was a firing on, like, the employees are fired on some reasons like shortage of orders or lack of finances, etc. Like n number of reasons were given. However, out of those 200 who signed up to be a part of the trade union, 150 are thrown out of their jobs. Then again in the same report, in India, many owners, they have confessed that they are more interested in hiring women as garment workers, because women, firstly, most of them are not interested in becoming part of the union. Second, even if some of them are interested, their husbands or families, they do not allow them to be active part of trade unions. Then in South India, there's a trend of hiring unmarried girls for 2 to 3 seasons, because they are actually collecting a dowry for their marriages, and once they collect enough dowry, the family gets them married, and they move to some other part of the country. So those workers, they are never actually workers on paper. They are not registered anywhere. They are not registered. They can't be a part of the union, and that makes them extremely vulnerable. In fact, University of California, they conducted a research, and they printed it by the name of tainted garments. And they went and spoke at 3 different factories in India, located in South India, and all the workers they spoke to, they were both male and female, and none of the worker, like not even one worker knew what is a trade union, and they had no idea that they have a right to form or be a part of the trade union. That's how bad it is. Of course, I'm still at an initial stage. I've just given my candidacy. I still plan to conduct in-depth research. I also plan to conduct interviews with leaders of trade unions. But what I have realized is that there is simply no way, or there is simply no substitute for hard law. I mean, private regulations might help in one way or the other, in some ways, in small cosmetic ways, but if you actually need to deliver results, if we actually want workers to have right to form trade unions, right to have safety, right to have at least decent wages, collective bargaining, only state mandated hard laws can help them. Your private regulations, your CSR, they can't really deliver strong concrete results. So yeah, let's see where it goes. Thank you. I'm open for questions. Yes.
Go for it, Mickey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think I read your proposal because I think you're working under Mihail, and then he shared us as one of good example, particularly very strong literature review. I was very impressed, starting from international soft law instrument to the more practical international agency to the national, to make it this soft law becoming more use Kogan's type of a more binding the norm. So my question is, just sorry if I can make just bit the kind of personal question. Are you in Costa Rica? Because your subject is really comparison of Bangladesh and India. That's I think great comparison of two countries. But are you doing more like a methodology part? It's more I thought the document analysis mainly. So
Yes.
you don't need to be
No, I am.
and also, sorry, just the last question is, what is really your formulated one sentence research question plus methodology? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your question. I'm an Indian and I'm based out of India. As far as my research is concerned, I am essentially doing doctrinal research. But as I said, for one part of my research, I would be focusing on interviewing the trade union leaders. I'm not interviewing. Let's say I won't be interviewing the labor ministries, because I think we need to have the opinion of the right holders. The right and the right holder, the correct representation of right holders are the trade union leaders. Because as far as labor ministries are concerned, they already have given their version in the law they have drafted. So for that, I'm looking into questioning. And earlier I was thinking of doing a one-on-one interview, but now because of the coronavirus situation, I'm not really sure whether it would be possible. So I think I might be doing telephonic interviews or through email. I mean, that I still need to figure out, but I would be focusing on that.
And then your research
question also.
Your research question. So I just want to get one sentence of your research question, your key research question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, just a second, please. Now, my main question, if I have to summarize it in just one sentence, it would be, how can legal accountability be strengthened in global supply chains to address abuses of internationally recognized core labor standards in the garment industry in India and Bangladesh? Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Okay, Srishti, hi, very good presentation, very clear. Thank you for it, and kind of enjoyed listening to it. And understanding the issue. I think the issue is prevalent everywhere, including United States. You can see, a lot of, different parts where the garment industries, where a lot of foreigners are working and under very low wage. And I think probably this issue is even prevalent in developed countries also. Even though this, you probably can say they have strict laws, but it's still happening. And in some way, it's also connected to trafficking, labor trafficking. So this is something that I had previously worked a little bit on. So it's very interesting to know your perspective. One of the things I wanted to know, it's a great presentation. I thought I do have certain contacts in Bangladesh. If you ever wondered, there's someone who works with, there's someone who's working in labor, like I think the textile industry, if I'm not mistaken. I met her in one of the UN conference, and she might be a good accent. Then I have one person who is in ILO in India. He might be a good contact for you too. Also in Bangalore, India, who I think they were working with trafficking, in connection with labor, textile industry and trafficking. So if ever you wanted all that connection, just, I would be glad to, contact and connect with you.
That is so nice. Thank you so much. I'll get in touch with
Okay,
you.
you're welcome. Okay, thank you. It's a great presentation. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. It was a great presentation for me too. I don't know if there were any other questions. I saw that Larissa's written. Thank you. Very interesting topic. Thank you for your great presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I certainly learned a lot. I don't know if there were any other questions from anyone here. Apologies for the noise. Okay, well, I guess if there are no questions, I mean, well, thanks. I'm inspired, and I'll do some reading around this. I do some work on trafficking, so I'm actually quite.
Sorry, just one question. Is this is the last seminar for the series, or we have one more?
You have one more. Basically, Tia Mike was supposed to give before me, but there was some clash. Later.
Yeah, because sorry, because we are really behind. Even like I started before you, and then like with Bina is already advanced, and then I don't know, we just finished the second doctoral seminar, and we are working on the proposal, and hopefully finished definitely before end of this year. And then anyway, because you're already advanced, we learned a lot from you. But if you really continue this kind of series, I love to participate, and hopefully I can also present. I don't know what kind of a plan you have after this. If you can discuss, maybe we can discuss at the last meeting. Would be fantastic. We want to be also connected somehow, more structured way, because everybody's working isolated way. We have to. This is independent work, but at the same time, it's nice to have this kind of a very organized, structured way to understand what others working, what others are facing, what kind of issues they are facing. That would be fantastic. I hope you. I don't know who really initiated. Maybe everybody like you. But it's nice to continue if you can, and then I would definitely want to participate.
I think these are great suggestions. I'm keen to interact more, and I rarely get to speak about my thesis to people, so I'm always happy to speak more about it, just to, if anything, to get some practice before the hopeful one day that I get to defend. So thanks a lot for that, and the comments and the questions are always really, really useful. But today it was really interesting to see how another form of legal research can be done, and what the research question was, and the method so far. So that's been really interesting. Nicole, if you've got anything to add.
No, I just think that this webinar series has been very good for us to practice, our presentation skills in a virtual setting, and also to share our our research that we feel passionate about. And like what you said, Natasha, I learned a lot about Natasha's research last week, and Srishti, I knew a little bit about yours from gosh, I guess that was 2 years ago. It seems so crazy, but it's nice to see your advances in this, and obviously the value in your research. So and continuing in a community setting the way we're doing this is so important right now, because we're not able to bounce ideas easily off of other colleagues, and we're all at different stages, and it's nice to hear what we're doing and to share our results. So I do hope that this continues. I know that what you're saying, I know that Tia is going to be doing his next week. But I think that was it in this first initial stage, where so maybe maybe this could be kind of picked up again maybe in January, as Mickey hopefully will have something by then, and those of you who are in that Senate, the next wave of researchers, because we are here and we're all doing this together.
Yeah, and then definitely I want to really also hear everybody's the advancement, the development, because I understand that everybody research topic, research question, methodology, you're doing it already. And I think Natasha will be already final by then, hopefully. And then I really want to hear everybody's, progress. It's really encouragement, also
Exactly.
learning.
It's of great help, especially now when we have very less connection with the outside world. Even like PhD people anyway have very less connection, but now it's all the more worse.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'll be final, but I'll still chime in. So, okay, well, so I guess with that, thanks a lot. And
Thank you, Sasha, for being the moderator. Thank you so much.
yeah, and I guess we've recorded this session for anyone who joined late and would like to watch it later on. But thank you so much, Srishti. I really learned a lot today. Okay, well, take good care all.
Thank you. Thank you,
Everyone.
Srishti.
Bye.
Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
ladies.
bye-bye.